March 1st, 1943, 0147 hours. Blackett Strait, Solomon Islands. I'm gripping the .5 caliber machine gun so tight my knuckles have gone numb. The night is darker than any I've experienced. No moon, heavy clouds, just the faint phosphorescence of our wake trailing behind PT-109. My boat, my crew. 60 feet of plywood and airplane engines pretending to be a warship. 2,000 yards ahead, invisible in the darkness, a Japanese destroyer is bearing down on our position. The skippers whispered into the voice tube, "Contact bearing 030, range closing fast." My gunner's mate, Tommy Chen, is feeding the ammunition belt with hands that haven't stopped shaking since we left Rendova. In exactly 4 minutes, we're going to attack a vessel 10 times our size, with weapons that seem absurdly inadequate for the job. 4 torpedoes, 2 machine guns, and a lot of American audacity. The destroyer doesn't know we're here yet. They're about to discover that the darkness they've ruled for 18 months no longer belongs to them. My name is Lieutenant John D. Bulkley, United States Navy, Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 3. People often ask me what it was like to fight the Japanese Navy in plywood boats barely longer than a city bus, armed with torpedoes that worked half the time and engines that announced our position to every enemy ship within 10 miles. The truth is, we were too busy trying not to die to think about making history. Every torpedo we carried represented hundreds of American lives that might be saved. Marines hitting beaches, cargo ships bringing supplies, destroyers that wouldn't have to face cruisers alone. My parents back in Longview, Texas got a telegram every month I survived. By March 1943, they'd received 11. 11 months of wondering if the next telegram would be different. 11 months of me wondering the same thing. To understand how a handful of plywood boats could challenge the Imperial Japanese Navy, you need to understand just how badly we were losing in early 1943. The Japanese controlled everything from Burma to the Gilbert Islands. Their destroyers and cruisers operated with impunity, shelling our positions at night, running supply missions we couldn't stop, evacuating their troops before we could trap them. We tried everything. Our destroyers couldn't catch theirs. They were faster, better armed, and their crews had been fighting since 1937. Our aircraft couldn't find them at night, and daylight raids cost us planes we couldn't replace. At Guadalcanal, Japanese destroyers had run supply missions down the slot for months, and we'd sunk maybe 1 in 10. The Marines on those islands were dying because we couldn't stop Japanese reinforcements. Traditional naval tactics were failing because we didn't have traditional naval strength. We needed something different, something the Japanese wouldn't expect, something that could operate in darkness, strike fast, and disappear before the enemy could retaliate. The Navy's answer was PT boats, motor torpedo boats. Plywood hulls, gasoline engines, torpedoes borrowed from destroyers. It seemed insane. I first saw PT-109 in January 1943 at Tulagi Harbor. She was an Elco 80-footer, 80 feet long, 20 feet wide, drawing just 5 feet of water. Her hull was plywood, actual plywood, laminated in 3 layers. She displaced 56 tons fully loaded. For comparison, a Japanese destroyer displaced 2,000 tons. She had 3 Packard V12 gasoline engines generating 4,500 horsepower total. Top speed, 41 knots in calm seas. In reality, we rarely pushed past 35 knots because the engines overheated, the hull pounded so hard it loosened rivets, and the spray blinded anyone on deck. Armament, 4 Mark 8 torpedoes and tubes, 2 twin .5 caliber machine gun turrets, 1 20mm Ehrlichen cannon, and depth charges we never used because getting close enough to a submarine was suicide. The torpedoes were temperamental. They ran deep, ran shallow, ran in circles, or didn't run at all. This wasn't a warship. It was a speedboat with delusions of grandeur. Then I met Lieutenant Commander Robert Kelly, the squadron commander. He was 29 years old, had commanded PT boats since 1941, and evacuated General MacArthur from the Philippines, the mission that made PT boats famous. Kelly looked at our skeptical faces during the first briefing and said, "Gentlemen, you're thinking these boats are suicide. You're right, for anyone trying to fight like a destroyer. But we're not destroyers. We're mosquitoes. We don't slug it out. We bite, inject poison, and disappear before they can swat us." We were 7 men united by one simple fact. We'd all volunteered for this insanity. Tommy Chen, 22, San Francisco, gunner's mate. His family ran a restaurant in Chinatown. Before Pearl Harbor, he'd been studying engineering at Berkeley. After Pearl Harbor, he'd enlisted the next day. He maintained our .5 cals with religious devotion, cleaning them twice daily. Jamming at the wrong moment means we're all dead. I'm not dying because of a dirty gun. James Smokey Caldwell, 25, Detroit, motor machinist mate. He'd worked at Ford before the war, building engines for B-24 bombers. He could diagnose engine problems by sound alone. Port engines running 50 RPM too high, he'd call out over the roar. He was always right. Patrick O'Brien, 19, Boston, torpedo man, youngest guy on the boat. He'd lied about his age to enlist at 17. His job was prepping torpedoes, setting depth, arming warheads, maintaining tubes. He treated those torpedoes like his children, constantly checking settings. These fish cost $10,000 each. That's more than my dad made in 5 years. Raymond, Starkey, 24, rural Georgia, radio man. Spoke slowly, thought quickly. He could copy Morse code at 30 words per minute and operate our radar scope while tracking 3 contacts simultaneously. Before the war, he'd been a telegraph operator for Western Union. Charles Bud Morrison, 23, Chicago, another machinist mate, Smokey's partner in the engine room. They communicated in a language of hand signals and shouted abbreviations nobody else understood. Morrison smoked constantly, even in the engine room where gasoline fumes made it suicidal. Edgar Eddie DeLong, 26, New York, coxswain and my second in command. He'd been merchant marine before the war, sailed every ocean, and could navigate by stars alone. He'd saved my life during training when I'd miscalculated a turn at high speed. His hands on the wheel kept us from ramming a reef. And me? 27 years old, Annapolis class of 1939. I'd requested destroyer duty. They had given me a Plywood boat.
We trained at Melville, Rhode Island in January 43. The training was designed to kill us before the Japanese could. Night navigation with no lights, high-speed turns that threatened to throw us overboard. Torpedo runs where we charged toward target barges at 40 knots, launched at 500 yards, then executed 180-degree turns while shells splashed around us. Simulated, but the danger was real enough. Commander Kelly's philosophy: your greatest weapons aren't torpedoes or guns. They're darkness, speed, and surprise. Master those and you'll sink ships. Forget them and you'll die fast. We arrived at Tulagi on February 15, 1943. The base smelled of diesel fuel, rotting vegetation, and death. Japanese bombers hit us every few days. The nights belonged to their destroyers. Our first mission was February 23rd. Intelligence reported a Japanese destroyer transiting Blackett Strait at midnight. 4 PT boats, 109, 157, 117, 162. We launched at 2300 hours. I was terrified and trying not to show it. We found the destroyer at 0130 hours, silhouetted against clouds. We attacked from 4 directions simultaneously, 18 torpedoes total. The destroyer turned toward us, firing everything. Shells threw up waterspouts 50 feet high. Tracers cut through darkness like horizontal rain. PT-162 took a direct hit. The gasoline tanks erupted. The boat became a fireball in seconds. We heard screaming over the radio, then nothing. 4 men died. PT-171 launched 2 torpedoes at point-blank range. Both missed, running too deep. The destroyer escaped. We learned 3 lessons that night. Japanese destroyers were faster than we'd thought. Their gunners were terrifyingly accurate, and our torpedoes were garbage. Kelly changed our tactics immediately. No more simultaneous attacks from multiple angles. That meant boats in each other's line of fire. New doctrine: single-file approach. First boat attacks and draws fire. Following boats attack while enemy is distracted. Use radar shadows. Hide against islands so enemy radar can't find us. Fire torpedoes at 500 yards or closer, even if it meant suicidal proximity. On March 1st, 1943 at 1400 hours, intelligence came in from coast watchers on New Georgia. A Japanese heavy cruiser, the Obel, is making a supply run to Vila. She displaced 9,000 tons, mounted 6 8-inch guns, and could sink us with her wake. But she was carrying ammunition and reinforcements the Marines desperately needed us to stop. Kelly called for volunteers. 12 boats available. He picked 4, 109, 157, 109, and 171. I'd be lead boat. The briefing was short. Obel will transit Blackett Strait between 0100 and 0200 hours. We'll ambush from Kolombangara Island. This cruiser cannot reach Vila. I don't care if you have to ram her. We departed Tulagi at sunset, 1842 hours. The sky was blood red, clouds building to the north. Smokey and Bud prepped engines, running them up to temperature while checking oil pressure and coolant levels. Tommy loaded 50 caliber belts, armor piercing and tracer alternating. LeBryan set torpedo depth at 6 feet and armed warheads. Starkey checked radar and radio systems. Eddie plotted our course. We motored north at 15 knots, conserving fuel. The sea was moderate, 3-foot swells, light wind from the southeast. At 2300 hours, we reached our ambush position off Kolombangara's western shore. We shut down to idle, drifting in the radar shadow of the island. Waiting in darkness. The only sounds, water lapping against our hull, distant thunder and Eddie's quiet breathing beside me. At 0122 hours, Starkey called from the radar scope. Contact bearing 030, range 12,000 yards, speed 18 knots. The mathematics were simple. She was 12,000 yards away, closing at 18 knots. We had maybe 20 minutes before she reached us. At 0135, I saw her through binoculars, a massive shadow against darker sky, bow wave white against black water. She was alone. No escorts. Japanese arrogance. Kelly's voice crackled over the radio. All boats maintain position. Let her come to us. Attack sequence 109, then 157, then 171. Stay in the island's radar shadow until your attack run. At 2,000 yards, I could see her superstructure, 2 stacks, main gun turrets. At 1,500 yards, I could see men on her bridge. At 1,000 yards, I whispered, "All hands, battle stations, stand by to attack." My heart was hammering so hard I thought the Japanese could hear it across 1,000 yards of water. All engines, full throttle, attack bearing 045. Smokey and Bud slammed throttles forward. 3 Packard engines screamed from idle to 4,500 horsepower in seconds. PT-109 lunged forward like a kicked horse. We accelerated from 5 knots to 40 knots in 30 seconds. The hull pounded against waves, spray drenched everyone on deck. The Japanese cruiser didn't see us until we were 800 yards away. Then her searchlights blazed. We were illuminated, exposed, racing towards 9,000 tons of warship at 40 knots. Her 8-inch guns couldn't depress enough to hit us. We were too close, too fast. But her secondary batteries opened fire. 5-inch shells, 25mm machine guns. Tracers crisscrossed the darkness. A shell hit the water 50 feet to port, throwing up a waterspout that drenched us. Another shell hit 30 feet starboard. We were bracketed. The next one would kill us. At 500 yards, I screened fire torpedoes tubes 1 and 2. O'Brien mashed the firing button. 2 Mark 8 torpedoes dropped from tubes, motors ignited, and they raced towards the cruiser at 46 knots, leaving white wakes. The cruiser tried to turn, too slow, too late. The first torpedo struck amidships just below the waterline. The explosion was enormous, a flash that turned night into noon, a concussion wave that shook PT-109 like a toy. Flames erupted from the cruiser's hull. The second torpedo struck 15 seconds later, hitting the stern. Another explosion. The cruiser's aft magazines detonated. The stern lifted out of the water, propellers spinning uselessly in air. Men were jumping overboard, silhouettes against flames. I heard screaming. I tried not to think about it.
PT-157 attacked from the opposite side while the cruiser was burning. 2 more torpedoes, 2 more hits. The cruiser was dying, listing 15 degrees to starboard, fires spreading. PT-171's attack was almost unnecessary, but they put 2 more torpedoes into her anyway. 6 torpedoes, 6 hits. All of them had worked. The cruiser rolled onto her side at 0207 hours and sank bow first. 9,000 tons disappearing in 4 minutes. Starkey picked up Japanese radio traffic, screaming, panic, confusion. We escaped north at full speed. The cruiser's escorts, 2 destroyers we hadn't known about, arrived 10 minutes too late. They searched for us, but we were gone, hidden in the island's shadow. We returned to Tulagi at 0630 hours, 12 hours after departure. We'd been spotted by Japanese aircraft twice and had hidden in coves until they passed. Kelly met us at the dock. He didn't say much, just nodded. Intelligence later confirmed, Aoba sank with 870 men aboard. Only 200 survivors. The ammunition and reinforcements never reached Vila. The Marines held their position. The cost and the legacy. Between February and August 1943, PT Squadron 3 lost 18 boats and 97 men. PT-162 lost February 23rd. PT-171 sunk by destroyer off Vila April 12th. PT-157 destroyed by aircraft June 8th. Tommy Chen was killed in July when PT-109 was rammed by a destroyer. Smokey Caldwell survived the war, returned to Detroit, worked for GM until 1982. O'Brien made it home, became a police officer in Boston. Starkey went back to Georgia, ran a radio shop. Morrison died in 1944, different boat, same war. Eddie DeLong commanded his own PT boat, survived, became a harbor pilot in New York. Commander Kelly retired as Rear Admiral, died in 1979. I stayed in the Navy, made captain, taught at Annapolis. We still have reunions. There are fewer of us every year. The PT boat program expanded after Aoba. By war's end, the Navy operated over 500 PT boats across every theater. The tactics we developed, radar shadows, single-file attacks, point-blank engagement, became doctrine. The Japanese never adapted. They kept sending major warships without adequate escorts, kept underestimating Plywood boats, kept losing ships to enemies they considered beneath notice. A Japanese admiral wrote after the war, "We feared American carriers and submarines. We should have feared their mosquito boats more. They cost us dozens of ships and thousands of lives, and we never found an effective counter." That's our legacy. Not the biggest battles or the most ships sunk, but proof that courage and innovation beat tradition and size. Modern Navy SEALs use small boats for similar missions. The DNA is ours. I'm 97 years old now. Most of my crew is gone, but I still remember the smell of gasoline and cordite, the vibration of Packard engines at full throttle, the sound of torpedoes launching, the flash of explosions lighting Eddie's face beside me. We were boys who became men in 80 feet of plywood. We fought from disadvantage and turned it into advantage. We proved that free people given inadequate tools and impossible odds will find ways to win. PT-109 was eventually sunk, rammed by a destroyer in August 1943. I survived. Most of my crew didn't. But on March 1, 1943, we sank a Japanese cruiser with a plywood boat. And that night, the Japanese learned that darkness no longer belonged to them. The Japanese were stunned by PT boats because they were fast when they should have been slow, deadly when they should have been harmless, everywhere when they should have been nowhere. By the time they understood what we were, we'd already sunk too many of their ships. The shadows they had ruled since 1941 belonged to us now, and we used them well.